Good morning, everyone. Week 5 main slate is going to kick off in a little bit. Jets-Vikings is the early game in London this week. We do have a little bit of a more balanced schedule as far as the TV games go. In terms of early wave and late games, we'll have 6 going in the early window, 4 afternoon games, and then the big-time matchup of Cowboys and Steelers in the Sunday night game. Really just a great game to have on Sunday Night Football. 2 of the biggest brands in the NFL. Storylines coming into this one for both teams. We'll talk more about that one in a few minutes. Before we get into the Bucs-Falcons game from Thursday night, I have to talk about our betting picks. We ended up cashing on the Kyle Pitts receiving yardage, took the over, and the Falcons money line pick. I can't really say we got screwed on the Bucky Irving carries total. We did take the over 9.5. Unfortunately, he was on 9 exactly. But we have to acknowledge, while it's super unlucky and a bad beat, if Irving doesn't fumble that late carry, maybe Atlanta never has a chance to even get back into that game. And then the Atlanta money line goes out the window. So we'll take the 2 out of 3. But let's get into that Thursday night tilt with the Bucs and the Falcons. Really great game. Very entertaining. A lot of action. A lot of scoring. Thursday Night Football delivered. The game went back and forth. We had a lot of explosive plays. It was a divisional game, so you had some consequences at stake. And overall, just one hell of a game. Raheem Morris and the Falcons come out with a W, and they needed it. The Falcons were not in a position of being able to drop that game and stay competitive within the division. Had they lost that game, they would find themselves in a position of already being down by 2 games within the division. But have to give credit where credit is due. They found a way to win. They improved to 3-2. And they're also now 2-0 in the division and 3-0 in the conference overall. I will say, just as we told you on our last episode, Atlanta's offense was due. Now, I did not expect to see quite what we saw on Thursday night. I mean, Kirk Cousins throwing for 500 plus and 4 touchdowns. I would have never predicted that. But he did it. And credit to Cousins and the Atlanta offense. They won that game. They get in position to tie it late on the field goal by Koo, and then they win the game with the touchdown pass to Hodge in overtime. That's now the 3rd game-winning touchdown drive we've seen from Cousins this season, following those games against the Eagles on Monday night in Week 2, and then that game against the Saints last week. Or actually, let me back up. I guess it was a field goal last week against the Saints. So 3rd game-winning drive, 2 of those being touchdowns. I still like Atlanta to win the division. On our 2024 Teams with New Head Coaches episode, I had picked them to win 11 games before the season, and I think that 11 wins in the NFC South should easily get you the home playoff game. I do think the Bucs are for real, and I can see them making it to the postseason. They won the division last year, but this is a new year, and I think Atlanta, given the weapons they have on offense at the skill positions, and they had a top 5 offensive line in 2023, and then you bring in a new quarterback, new head coach, new offensive coordinator. So let's see what these guys can do. Now, from a statistical perspective, let's acknowledge that I think they said 80-ish offensive plays Atlanta had. That is not what you typically expect from any NFL team. I mean, I would assume the Falcons could very well go the rest of the way, not having anywhere near that many offensive snaps. But offense made a return Thursday night. That is for sure. Transition to our next primetime game. Huge matchup on Sunday Night Football. Cowboys at Steelers. The line is currently sitting at Steelers minus 2.5. Total is at 43.5. I kind of like the under on this one, but given the all-time wrong I put out there last week on the Steelers-Colts game, something tells me I should probably just sit this one out. I think Dallas needs this game in a big way. Not necessarily to keep pace in the division. Even if the Commanders win today, the Cowboys still have to play Washington twice. But just from a perspective of setting the tone for the rest of the way, Sometimes you have games early on in the season that come late December, you can look back and you say, yeah, that one really got us going. It put us on a path. For the Cowboys, I think that's what you have on the line tonight. I would say that Giants game a couple of Thursdays ago was more of a, hey, let's stop the bleeding type of game. But this game against Pittsburgh tonight, this is a true test against a legit team, obviously a great defense. Sunday Night Football, everyone's tuned in. You have an opportunity to get your season headed in the right direction. The unit I'm going to be watching closely in tonight's game is the Cowboys defense. We saw two just horrendous performances in the two home games against the Saints and the Ravens. They did whatever the hell they wanted to. They dominated the Cowboys defense. Now, Dallas did look better against the Giants in Week 4, but it's the Giants. So I'm not putting much stock into that win. I actually think they have a good chance to hold the Steelers' offense in check, but it's ultimately going to come down to one thing. Can they stop the run? We know the Steelers are going to want to run the football. We saw New Orleans and Baltimore run it right down their throats, and Dallas had no answers. And they never had a chance in those games. Steelers will be without Jaylen Warren again in tonight's game, but I expect a run-heavy approach. One player that is not talked about a whole lot for the Steelers offense is Cordarrelle Patterson. He's made some plays this season, and he had a nice game in Indy last week. He will not be playing tonight. That is a blow for the Steelers because the one thing you saw in those Saints and Ravens games, they just wore down the Cowboys defense. They just kept going back to the run. And as a defense, when you are getting run on over and over and over, it sucks. It is demoralizing, and the tackling gets sloppier as the game goes on. And with the Steelers, you would have been dealing with a 1-2 combo of Harris and Patterson just slamming into you repeatedly. Najee Harris is huge. Patterson is just as big. Like, he has bounced around the league. Most people only really knew him as a kickoff return guy with tons of speed early in his career. But in New England and then Chicago, most recently Atlanta, it's clear that guy is more of a running back. He just happens to wear an 80 number. I think that's a break for the Cowboys to not have to deal with that. Now, the Steelers' offense is not super explosive, so if Dallas can defend the run tonight, they've got a nice chance to get one here as a road underdog. I am curious to see how Fields looks in this situation tonight, where he's going to need to make some plays through the air. They were kind of forced into that situation last week once they got behind at Indy. I think this game is going to be more competitive. And one thing that gets lost when you look at stats or just look at the box score after a game, it is a completely different dynamic when you spend a lot of time down 2 to 3 possessions and you are scrambling just to get back into the game. Like, just to get to within striking distance. Because while Fields had a big game statistically, and give him credit, he made some big-time plays, that game ended 27-24 Colts. But it did not feel anywhere near that close if you were watching that game real time. Had that game been played more in the, say, final scores, hypothetically 20-17, well, then the game script is completely different. And in a tighter game, where you can't get anything going on the ground, how does that go for Fields? I like Pickens, and Calvin Austin has also been making some plays for them. Freiermuth has been really good ever since he got to the league. I think if, and again, this is a big if, but if Dallas can defend the run well, you're not going to get this soft coverage trying to simply prevent the big play. And are those guys, along with Fields, going to be able to make it happen? Because I do not see the Cowboys offense being able to build any kind of big lead against this defense, especially at Pittsburgh. But we'll see. More than anything, I just hope this thing is competitive. We do not need another game like last week in Baltimore. I think we can all agree on that. Enjoy the game. Thanks for listening.